What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Nemo Propaganda here. Today we're going to review a brand that is not super popular, not super well known, and for the longest time I would avoid brands like that because my channel was small. I felt like I couldn't do them justice, but we're coming up on 20,000 subscribers, and while that's not as big as some of the big guys, I feel like I need to start bringing you guys brands that are not as well known as a brand like, say, Dyne Audio or Klipsch, for example, but brands that are still making great products that I feel like you guys should know about. This is the Sigberg 10D subwoofer coming out of Norway, made in Norway, pretty cool. And today we're going to talk about it. Let's get those main specs on screen so you guys can check that out. I'll tell you about the standout features that I think are unique, what the subwoofer sounds like, how I used it, how it connected with my equipment, how I set it up, what it sounded like, and how it compares to some other subwoofers, and then we'll wrap up the video. So, without further ado, some standout features. Made in Norway, pretty cool. Dual opposed 10s. You can see one on that side, one's on my side. Hypex amplification with a 9-band user-definable PEQ. Super cool stuff. Whether you got phase issues or a ton of room issues, you're going to be able to get the subwoofer dialed in, I promise you. And without too much work either, believe it or not. XLR inputs. A lot of times I review a subwoofer, you theater guys get upset. There's no XLR. This subwoofer has XLR, so don't worry about it, okay? Another standout feature is going to be compact form factor. Whether you've got a physical restraint or an aesthetic restraint that requires a small compact subwoofer that still has tremendous output. The subwoofer does have tremendous output. This subwoofer is fairly small. Depth is 16 inches. That's its largest dimension. The frontal area, you're looking at essentially a 14-inch cube, guys. This is very small. Now, I said it had tremendous output. What do I mean by that? Well, you don't believe me? Check Audioholics' website and compare it to something like a JL Audio E110, which is JL Audio. We know they're the kings of output in terms of compact subwoofers. The Sigberg 10D, from what I saw on Audioholics' website, had just as much output as a JL Audio E110. And even more in some of the mid-bass frequencies. That was surprising to see. So it's bringing the bass, right? But in my opinion, you know, features don't sell a product and features aren't the reason to buy a product. This is hi-fi. We care about what it sounds like. If you're me, you also care what it looks like, and most of us care what it costs. So look, let's get this out of the way. It's not cheap. It's $3,000, but it's made in Norway and it's got some fancy parts in it, so I could kind of see why it costs what it costs. The cabinet's built like a tank. This thing is small, but it still manages to weigh 60 pounds. So what does it sound like? Is it worth the money? Look, this is a pretty simple one. Bass fidelity is going to be high. Sound quality is going to be high on this one. I'm going to consider this an SQ subwoofer for the most part. It's going to extend very low. It's going to get into the teens in most rooms. It's going to have really good note-to-note distinction, fairly good transient response. It's going to have some of the best mid-bass performance most people have ever heard out of a subwoofer. I promise you that. The drivers this subwoofer uses, I don't know who makes them. I don't know if they're custom units or if they're off-the-shelf units. But if they're off-the-shelf units, I have a feeling these are drivers that are used in higher-end speakers because the way they produce mid-bass sounds like a speaker, not a subwoofer. And those of you that have tried to blend a subwoofer as high as something like 100 hertz, you know, when a subwoofer produces 120 hertz, it doesn't sound clean and clear like a good speaker. The Sigberg 10D does, which was very impressive. Its mid-bass articulation, easily just one of its most impressive sonic characteristics. Now, look, of course it can play loud, it can get low, it can do all the other things a subwoofer can do, but that really blew me away because most subs in the market, in my opinion, sound best at around 50 hertz or lower. Once you get them above, say, 60 hertz, they start to sound a little muddy in my opinion, and I generally don't recommend people cross over too much above 60 hertz. Now, I know a lot of you guys are doing 80 hertz. I don't want to hear it. I still think it's wrong. I don't recommend it. And I invite you to consider a lower crossover point. You might be surprised with how good it sounds. But of course, I'm sure some rooms might sound best at 80 hertz. Anyway, I digress. The 9-band PEQ is interesting. When you look on the back of this subwoofer, there's no phase knob for variable phase. There's no polarity switch either, nor is there a frequency knob to adjust crossover frequency. And I was like, what the hell is going on here? I emailed the company. I was like, yo, how do I dial in phase? And they're like, nah, we don't really believe in that. And I'm like, what does that mean? You don't believe in that? How is someone supposed to? I was like just baffled, right? I thought these guys were crazy, but I kept reading their email, and what they said was they discovered a lot of their customers were confused by phase. They had a hard time getting the phase dialed in, and even when a lot of their customers got the phase dialed in, they still had all these room issues that caused all these, peaks and nulls, and were never happy with their bass. And I've conversed with more people than most manufacturers because I have a YouTube channel, I have a free Discord, and I would say I've had a similar experience. Most end users do seem to have a hard time with bass, and even when with phase, and even when they get their phase dialed in perfectly, they still tend to have a lot of room issues. So what Sigberg did, or at least this was their idea, they said, let's forget about the ability to adjust phase or polarity or whatever you want to call it. Let's give the customer a 9-band PEQ that's user definable. That'll allow them to use the PEQ to fix any phase issues they may have. Because the reality is, even with a variable phase knob, oftentimes you might get your phase mostly right at a certain frequency, but it's still off at another one. The 9-band PEQ allows you to boost or reduce certain frequencies as needed to get it to sound like it's got perfect phase. And then you've got all these other bands of PEQ left over you could use to dial in any room issues you may have. And I gotta say, it works. It works. So guys, different isn't wrong. It's just different. And in this case, different it works. It does require you to just pull out your laptop and use the included USB cable to get everything dialed in, because it's a Hypex plate amplifier and it uses Hypex software, I believe. It might not be Hypex software, honestly, I'm not sure, but software is very easy to use. I do wish it was a cell phone app. I got to be honest with that one. That is a little criticism I do have. At $3,000 for the subwoofer, I feel like you shouldn't have to pull out a laptop. It did feel a little bit antiquated, a little bit cumbersome, if you will, but it was about 5 or 10 minutes and I was finished. And I'm going to go ahead and say, once you get this thing dialed in, you're not going to need to make any changes or adjustments. You're just not. And then there's also going to be the theater guys that have your own onboard bass management through your like AVR or something. You're just never even going to need to use that. So either way, it works, and it works really well, guys. So whether you're a stereo only guy and you're going to use that built-in 9-band PEQ, or you're a theater guy and you're going to just bypass that, run this thing full range, use your AVR to do all your processing, you are going to be able to get the subwoofer to integrate perfectly, fairly easy. And I do mean perfectly. The handoff between your speakers and this subwoofer, going to be fantastic. That's one thing the subwoofer does really, really well. So, told you about some standout features, told you what it sounds like. Let me tell you how I had it set up. I didn't want to have to keep messing with that PEQ every time I switched speakers. So what I decided to do was just pick a set of speakers, get the subwoofer dialed in, and just listen for as many hours as I could. That's how I like to do my reviews. I like to listen for as long as possible. I don't know how long most reviewers listen to gear before they review it, but Nemo Propaganda does a minimum of 10 hours of listening. Oftentimes it's closer to 30 or 40 hours of listening. So I put a lot of hours on this bad boy. The speakers I used were the Hecko Salon Revolution 3s. I chose those because they're vented and have a lot of bass. And when a speaker's vented and has a lot of bass, it's actually harder to integrate with a sub. If you're wondering what kind of speakers are easy to integrate with a sub, it'd be a speaker that doesn't have a lot of bass. Think something like a Focal Aria 906. Or a speaker that's even easier to integrate with a sub is going to be a sealed speaker, something like the ATC SCM11. Super easy to integrate those because there's no port. It's just so much easier to dial in. But I wanted to pick something that was challenging. I didn't want to be able to get the sub to integrate easily. I wanted it to be a challenge. I wanted to make sure other people wouldn't have a hard time. That's why I chose the Hecko Salon Revolution 3. My amplifier of choice during the review period was the Billy amp by Heaven 11 that you can see behind me here coming out of Canada. Did you guys know the Billy amp was this little? I had no idea. This thing is so small and good looking. Review coming soon. Let's stay on topic. So, how does it sound compared to other subwoofers? So let's talk about some other dual opposed subwoofers. Again, Just to refresh, the Sigberg 10Ds dual opposed 10s, 500 watts RMS. And don't let that 500 watts fool you. I know a lot of other subs have 1,000 watts or more. This subwoofer plays really loud, louder than some of the, look, the JL Audio E110 that this can play as loud as has over 1,000 watts. So wattage is not the end all be all of a subwoofer's ability to play loud. System efficiency is a huge factor, guys. Let's start with something like the SPS Micro. Obviously, it's a lot cheaper at $900. It's got dual 8s and it's got 800 watts RMS. Some of you guys might think it's got dual 8s that are smaller than the Sigberg, but it's got 300 watts more. They could probably play about the same in terms of extension or output. No, not even close. The Sigberg 10D can play tremendously louder and extend tremendously lower. The SPS Micro is a great little sub, but listen, a bigger sub is a bigger sub. At the end of the day, the Sigberg 10D is going to outperform it in output and extension, in mid-bass articulation, in note-to-note distinction, nuanced detail handling of delicate passages, just bass quality, fidelity, output, and extension. Overall, it's not even a comparison. Even if you had 2 or 3 SPS Micros, a single Sigberg 10D would still outperform. What else can we do? Let's talk about the KF92. It's recently been renamed the KC92. That's another dual opposed sub. That's closer in price. That's $2,000. The KF92 is a great sub. Its party trick is going to be its ability to have thunderous extension. Just really, really killer extension out of a really small cabinet. Now, the KF92 does have an active DSP, so as you demand more and more volume out of it, that bass extension starts to roll off, so you lose extension so you can get more volume. The Sigberg 10D is not going to do that. The Sigberg 10D is going to play louder. It's going to extend almost as low. The KF92 gets like down into the 11, 12 hertz as long as you keep the volume real low. The Sigberg 10D should get down to about 18 hertz in most rooms, possibly a few hertz lower. So, I mean, they're close. They both get real low, but the 10D by Sigberg is going to be able to play those low frequencies at much louder volumes. Despite the KF92 having dual 9.5-inch drivers, that's just half an inch smaller and 1,000 watts. You would think the KEF would play louder. Nope. Again, guys, system efficiency is really important. The Sigberg 10D is a more efficient design. It's going to play louder. It's going to extend lower, even though it has less power than the KF92. So I hope those of you that have been following me for a while, you've heard me say this a million times. Wattage is not the end-all be-all of a subwoofer's ability to play loud. It's just not. Stop comparing subwoofers based on wattage, guys. I'll be honest. I'm going to go as far as to say wattage is the least important spec on a subwoofer. That's my belief, honestly. What other comparison can we do here? Let's see. Is there any non-dual opposed? Oh, we got to compare it to the JL Audio E110. I mean, that's the one it has similar output to. That's going to be really important. So let's say you've heard of JL Audio E110. You know what it does. It does have good note-to-note distinction. It's a very quick sub, really, really, really powerful bass, but it is an SPL subwoofer, meaning tonally it's going to be very heavy. Some people are going to find that fatiguing. I'm one of those people. I own a JL Audio E110. I like it a lot, but I can only listen to it for about 20 to 30 minutes personally until I get fatigue. Some people like that heaviness on the ears that SPL subwoofers produce. If you like that, by all means, get an SPL subwoofer. You're going to love that. The Sigberg 10D is an SQ subwoofer. It's going to be light on the ears, hard on the body. That's what SQ subwoofers do. So that's going to be a huge difference they both have, is just the tonal characteristics. The Sigberg 10D is going to be lighter, more airy. The JL Audio E110, more aggressive, more violent, more tonally heavy, right? Both subs have good note-to-note distinction at all frequencies. The Sigberg 10D is going to take the edge in terms of just ultimate mid-bass articulation over the JL Audio E110. They're both going to play tremendously loud and get tremendously low. The Sigberg 10D is going to get a little bit louder in the mid-bass region, The JLE110 is like half a dB louder in some of the lower frequencies. You average it all out, the subs are about equal in terms of output. Again, at least according to Audioholics' measurements. So those are the comparisons. I've told you what it sounds like. I told you how I had it set up. I told you about the unique features. I told you how I got it to integrate well. It's a good sub. It's a good sub. I'll leave you with this just to give you that ultimate context. If on the SQ and SPL spectrum, let's say SPL spectrum's over here. Let's do left to right so you guys don't think it's positive and negative. If SPL is over here, all the way on the SPL category, we have brands like SVS and JL Audio, right? And then all the way on the SQ category, we have brands like Rel or Rhythmic, right? We have brands that are in the middle as well, right? And in the middle is like over here, which is pretty far away from that SQ category. In the middle is far away from the SQ category. In the middle is going to be a subwoofer like the Arendelle 17123-1S, right? And what else? Something like a KEF KC62, right? Kind of in the middle. It's not an SPL sub. It doesn't have that tonal heaviness to it, but it doesn't have the bass fidelity of the ultimate SQ performers by Rel and Rhythmic, for example, either. And there's been almost nothing in between something like an Arendelle 17231S and something like Rhythmic F12 SE or, anything by Rel like a S510 or T9X, for example. The Sigberg 10D, like if the Rel and Rhythmic camp is over here and Arendelle is over here, the Sigberg is like all the way over here. It is really close to like all the way SQ in terms of its bass fidelity, handling of delicate passages, note-to-note distinction, mid-bass articulation, and things like that. So I hope that helps answer that question. So I had a feeling if I didn't say that, you guys are going to get in the comments and be like, well, how does it compare to this Rhythmic model or this Rel model and this and that? And by explaining that, that's that. All right, don't ask me. So if you're looking for a compact subwoofer that has a 9-band PEQ that's going to allow you to dial it in perfectly with virtually any pair of speakers in virtually any room, space is a constraint for you. So you need something small but still with a lot of output. You need a tonal character that's going to be easy on the ears but still very forceful on the body. And you've got the pockets to afford it. The Sigberg 10D might be the subwoofer for you. If you've got any questions, ask in the comments below. This YouTube channel also has a free Discord. The link is in the description of all my videos. And until next time, take care.